need to join the LinkedIn one, right?
No. Okay, hello and welcome, guys, to episode number 9. So there's another amazing episode on the cards, and we have an amazing guest. We had Yoad Fekete from Myrror Security. So welcome, Yoad, to the Cyber Diaries podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I guess to start with, first of all, those of us who are not aware of what is Myrror Security, if you can do a little intro, obviously, what you guys do, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sounds good. So, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Myrror, which was founded about a couple of years ago. Um, my background is in DevOps, DevSecOps, about 13 years. Um, and reason being for starting Myrror basically is in my last role, I led a group of DevOps engineers at Microsoft in the cloud application security group. And Microsoft was one of the companies that's been hit by the SolarWinds attack. And my team was part of the incident response group. And post that, we've done some threat modeling, and we try to understand, what happens if Microsoft would be attacked tomorrow, the exact same way SolarWinds have been, or maybe one of our open source would be attacked. Um, are we protected? The answer was no, and I was looking for a solution. And then, I took my partner in crime, Woman, and we started Myrror. So Myrror is a software supply chain security platform, which specializes in supply chain attack, basically that goes beyond vulnerabilities to actual malicious code injections. And, the best example is the Exe attack that just happened like 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah. I'm really fascinated. Obviously, there's some amazing, obviously, founders and some amazing companies are coming out of stealth nowadays. But I guess if we could just circle back to obviously the first few days or the first sort of months when you started the company, um, I'm always fascinated because I'm sure most of the industry read now Ross's Haliluk's book about what's it like to be a cybersecurity founder. It talks a bit about how VCs operate, how PEs operate, but if you just come normally within sort of cybersecurity background, you're not really aware of of that information. So how was your initial journey? How did you find I guess tackling found creating the company, and obviously then what it takes to actually start achieving customers and things like that.
Yeah. First of all, it's a shitstorm. So that's the theme. And I'm always saying that we're lucky to not have specifically cybersecurity VCs, because first of all, I have the most amazing supportive VCs I can have, but we had to do everything we've done on our own. So
Yeah.
from day one. And then you start, and then you discover that it's not only that you have to build, the product, you have people. And all those cliches on culture and how you build a team for the long run. Um, and you've been thrown rocks at you every day. And first you stop them, and then you can't stop them anymore, and it hits you. But it's fine. So I think the most important thing is resiliency, because you can get to a point you want to quit after, a couple of months. But when you get to the stage, you're kind of, okay, this is fine. I'm good with that, and I'm going to make this better every day. So I did a bad hiring, no problem. I've learned from the mistake. We have a bug in production, and the customer was mad. How can we communicate better next? So you've mentioned Ross, and like I'm very, very, very tight on his newsletters, and it's amazing to see how right he is on a
Mm.
weekly basis, right? Um, and yeah, so you learn from reading those things, from experience yourself. So I think in the past couple of years, we got to a state that we have our team is very kind of the culture is really set. The product we've experienced tons of issues, of bugs, of production problems, customer problems, and then now the biggest effort is to get to customers. And then again, everybody says, and Ross says, and you're a CISO yourself, how do you get to the CISO, right?
Hmm.
But if you solve a real pain, eventually, you'd be able to do that. You'd be able to do it. There are a lot of kind of ways you can do it, paid or non-paid. I think the organic way would be the best way. And when I say organic, I don't expect you to go to our website and say, "Oh, what a cool, what another great platform." I'm going to send them a request a demo, call, and that's it. So you need to be smart, and we're trying to understand what you, the CISO, actually like want to have at a meeting. So if I'm go ahead and just going to pitch you, you're gonna throw me out of the stairs, right? So yeah, a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, I think it really rings, true. I think a few things. I spoke with a few founders now, and I think is the same common message. You'd always say, everyone has been saying that. Imagine like first 6 months you are being hit in the face every single day, and that's the feeling sort of you get. But I think as you say, it's really important, and I see this new wave of startup companies where really trying to understand how people make decisions, how being real true, I guess, community leaders, and actually showcasing their solutions. So if we start going into our sort of foundational insights, so you shared a bit about what Myrror does, but can you share a bit about I guess the inspiration and the story why Myrror happened? Because obviously you know there are tools, we're talking about SCA, we're talking SaaS, DaaS. There's various ways how companies thinking about addressing software supply chain and software security issues. But I guess what's the novel way, or what's the differentiator how Miro is doing it?
Yeah. So I think kind of the first thing is that other than the malicious code thing that I've experienced in Microsoft, my team spent about 30 to 50% of the time weekly just fixing problems without any context. So I try taking those two problems and getting it out and trying to understand if it's a big problem, right? Speaking to CISOs and application security professional, and then we looked out, and while a lot of the companies are like very much focused on vulnerabilities, right? And they're trying to make the experience of what they see with the incumbents better. um, we've set ourselves to protect the organization from one of the biggest threats out there. And again, after the recent XZ one, although it's not the first one and
Yeah.
not the second one, I don't need to explain why the consequences might be very painful. And vulnerabilities are not attacks, right? Vulnerabilities are mistakes made by developers most of the time. And those might lead to an attack, assuming the usually very complex conditions. Malicious code attacks, on the other hand, are intentional and guaranteed to be executed. So instead of focusing on just known vulnerabilities, we're saying, let us first protect you from malicious code that your developers might introduce on a daily basis. And only when you have that, sure, we can help you out with prioritizing and remediating your known vulnerabilities. So those were the phases of the company as well. Protection then, and then prioritization and remediation.
Yeah, I think it's very important because as you say, I've spent some time, building application security programs or building DevSecOps frameworks, and how does that work, and more often than not, we tend to focus on the code itself, or mostly about the code, and how we can, whether it's SAS scanning, DAS scanning, but it's really, and I think that it drives real maturity case when you actually start thinking about, okay, you have code, but you also need to address the build environment, and also where does that code come from, especially nowadays when, if we look at supply chain or open source software. I think some statistics somewhere was mentioned, I think it's about 80 to 90% of proprietary code is actually built by open source software. So these risks are, I guess, very important to think about and to address, especially when we're talking supply chain. Obviously we're not only talking about introducing danger within our company, but potentially to our clients when we start shipping product to our potential, clients.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I guess, if we go dig a bit deeper, so, what would you say sets Myrror apart in how you guys do, I guess software security from other, cybersecurity firms?
So if I'm taking that focus on supply chain attacks detection, we've built a unique technology, um, and the intention was to say, how can I ensure the integrity of the SDLC process in an agnostic way? Even if the open source library itself has zero security. And vulnerabilities, it's easy, right? You said it. There are two approaches in this kind of attestation world.
Yeah.
One, if you can integrate security on the open source world that will kind of attest for each step of the SDLC process from code to production, then you're safe. It's all good. The problem is that open source projects, they build us software for free. It's not fair, and you can't really ask them to implement security as an enterprise does. And I don't think that will ever happen eventually. That's my kind of thought. So we said, what if we can take the final software and the original source code and compare them? So like you compare two binaries with a checksum, for example, but now how do you take a compiled package and trace it back to the source code? And you'd be able to do so for your own builds and your own open source package. So think about it like a meal, right? You might get food poisoning, right, from a composed meal. How do you know which of the ingredients was poisoned after it's been cooked already to one dish? So we built a technology that first breaks down and reverses the compiled software, and then it uses proprietary patent pending language model, and that models knows to trace the compiled product back to the source code, up to the function level, and tell you if somebody managed to inject malicious code to that. So if you think about SolarWinds, XZ, Jump Cloud, 3CX, UA Parser, Coa.js, all of those attacks, whether through an account takeover or malicious package upload or CI/CD attack or just straight up typo squatting, for example, we can catch those kind of issues without having to integrate with the open source package.
Okay, brilliant. So, but I guess the question is, and I think this always, obviously, most of the time is very prevalent in cybersecurity world is threats are coming fast, and there's loads of them, obviously. So,
Yeah.
when we talk in XZ or Log4j or any of these sort of vulnerabilities that have been exploited, essentially, we only know after the fact how big it was. But how do we know which ones to fix or which ones to prioritize? Does your platform allow to do some sort of evaluation? Because we constantly keep talking about alert fatigue, and I guess that's another question that needs answering nowadays.
Yeah. So it's a good question because once we've had that guardrail in place, so if coming to the alert fatigue, which I again experienced myself a lot, and I like this part because today the feedback here from our customer really flows on a weekly basis. So what we're doing is that we want to give you like a context if you're actually using that code. So context can come from the code, can come from the cloud. So in the case of Log4j, you need a specific port open to the internet, right? So that's cloud context or production context. And our engine, it not only detects vulnerabilities and malicious code, we also calculate and try to verify if you're actually using the threat. So whether it's a direct or indirect vulnerability, so indirect is most of the part, right? By only using code reachability, our customers get anywhere from 50 to 90% reduction of noise, which is really amazing to see. And while I consider myself, by the way, very technical till these days, it's pretty magical to me, that thing, because how come we didn't do it, so far? maybe because the amount of vulnerabilities has been growing and it wasn't like that. Because if you take us back to, I don't know, 2015, you had vulnerabilities. I don't know if the amount was so big. So I think what we're seeing in the ecosystem, and I'm, happy to hear your opinion, is that people not only looking for detection, other way around, they're not looking for more detection, they're looking for give me context and prioritization on what I have today.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things at play. First of all, I think, and you are, I think, at the very right pulse, because whenever I talk about specific, tools that I'm thinking about integration, the first question is, you know, I am going to get 100 alerts. Well, how am I going to be able, my team, to solve all of those 100? So context is a key. And actually, we need to only fix that's potentially, going to cause disaster now. And the rest we can obviously plan in the future. But the key point as well, which you talked about in context, is especially when you're talking about software supply chain or software security, is because it becomes DevSecOps normally, it's a shared responsibility between the three teams, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the more tools will allow developers to self-serve and provide context, as you say, context is the key, because I've been in teams as well where, it's easy to say, oh, our tool, integrates in Jira. Yes, but if I'm going to drop now 50 tickets on developers, what do you think is going to happen? 1 week, they're going to fix it. Maybe second week, third week, they're not going to fix it. So it's about how we can create and showcase and actually write the context and provide information to developers so they understand why they're fixing that they're fixing something. Because normally, to me, I always say, that education piece where I say to developer, look, this is a risk. If we're not going to fix it, this is what's going to happen. These are the examples that happened in the wild before. And normally that education piece prevents the issue from happening in the future. So education not only allows them to fix, but it prevents from those things happening in the future. So I think that's the key point.
Let me ask you another tough question on that, double click on that. So if you're a B2B SaaS company, that's great. The context, and you involve the context, you explain the risk, even to the engineering team, and then you fix what needs to be fixed first. But what happens today when when you ship software, for example? So a lot of customers will run their scanners on your product, and then you can tell them all day long, listen, we're not actually using that code. And then they will tell you, I don't care, fix every high severity issue there is. Um, when do you think we will get to the era of kind of contextual SBOM, maybe?
Well, that's a difficult question, because the problem is, and I guess, that's where sometimes, I know sometimes people love and hate regulation, but at the same time, it forces a teaching moment. So, I had the similar conversations, for example, you get normally when you do B2B, you get questionnaires whenever you sell a specific product, isn't it? You get from other teams where they try and kick your tires, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, sometimes, and especially, I guess it's probably legacy mindset where security teams, for example, you will send them a document over TLS, but they will ask for another form of encryption, and you're like, yeah, but it's already encrypted, so why you want another encryption? Oh, because that's our policy and da da da. Well, and that's the problem. Sometimes people get into the habit of not thinking, but just applying regulations. And the problem is that regulations sometimes do not keep up with the times. So we need a ways that it's not too prescriptive and allows people obviously to think their own minds. And I guess that's how security, I guess, is shaping and evolving. And I assume, we're not going to get somewhere, but with how AI and stuff like that happening again, it always becomes a big learning curve, because everyone's panicking about AI, but I don't see a problem. AI it's something the same as when internet came about. It's going to separate those people who can leverage it and who can't.
Yeah. I
So yeah, I think it's it's I guess it's a good problem to have, and it requires education, and I think that's where vendors especially can be a real winners, because if you pave a way for specific way to do things and you showcase community leadership in and support and research and how this is going to help community drive, this security agenda forward, can be a transformational, I guess, event. Because, we know some vendors, push their agenda through marketing and pushy sale tactics, which yields, I guess, something, but it's very short-lived.
It
And
is.
community, obviously, the way cybersecurity community it is, it normally choose it and spits it out over time. So I think it's the way you approach community, I think, that will serve you well.
Yeah, the marketing fluff is already very much saturated, ingested by, security people.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Now, I guess we touched a few things, and I wanted to touch another thing. So we touched on, and I know there's a lot of research, there's a lot of documents coming, and I know, for example, I'm in, we're based in UK, so obviously most of the cybersecurity sort of research and requirements usually start in US, and then they've trickled down over to the UK. So with the announcement that, especially if you want to work with federal government, that you will need SBOMs, and I read your article where you mentioned SBOMs as well as F-bombs. I guess people probably think that, this is going to be a transformational way to protect organizations from potential, malicious code. But I know your viewpoint is that S-bomb and F-bomb is not going to be end at all, because they're still missing parts of the thing during the build of the code. So how does Myrror actually can help where S-bomb and F-bomb fails?
Yeah, so I think SBOM is good, first of all, for the inventory, right? For
Mm,
the visibility kind of cliche again. And also we have SBOM with Vex, which says, okay, this is the exploitability on the SBOM vulnerabilities. So what are the chances, or what is the vulnerability risk for that component? And then what we're trying to do, instead of, again, trusting on that SBOM document, is saying, okay, if we're going to, and again, I'm doing the equivalency of the composed meal. If we'll be able to take the software that you're using and, just disregard what the SBOM says, or use that as an enhancement, we can derive the SBOM from that binary. There's
mm,
no reason you can do that most of the times. And then you can check the components themselves, right? Especially if it's open source, right? You have, consequently, you have nothing to hide, right? Why the XE attack was a bit weird, because why would you put binaries in a test folder? So, but when you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to hide. And then I think that in the case of Log4j, everybody started talking about SBOM, right? Because why? People didn't know whether and where they have that Log4j library. And then it took like the holidays off a lot of security professionals or IT professionals. And then the SBOM shenanigans started, because you want to know what you have in your environment. But as I mentioned, it's not enough, because it's nice to know like what you have, but it doesn't protect you. So Vex is a nice document accompanying the SBOM, but I think the better approach to do that is not just by using the SBOM, is by actually like doing zero trust. And sorry if I apologize for using zero trust, right? You still need to verify that, even if you have that document, because you can't trust it.
yep. Yeah, I think it's important to think about, because, and especially, even when you think about SBOM, it becomes a very onerous task, because, when you think about SBOM, how much dependencies nowadays software has. And then the question is, I guess, as well, I haven't seen the latest documentation, but probably, I guess, is how deep do you go? Because you got third party, you got fourth party, fifth, the amount of the chain that creates, in the SBOM is, how deep do you go and where do you stop? Because
Yeah.
obviously, because I guess the question is, it's probably easier to do for a big development house or big team. When you have a small startup, again, you probably can, put a couple of people on there 24/7 building SBOMs.
Yeah, exactly. You have automation around that, and you have we're seeing a lot of systems that are able to ingest SBOM and kind of scan that SBOM for vulnerabilities, which I think is a good thing. It's a good thing because you didn't have that before, and that's another step towards asking your providers or vendors to provide you with SBOM in the case that you don't have when it's not open source, right? When it's open source, it's open source. You have that SBOM through either of your SCAs too.
Yeah. I think it's very important, as you say, because sometimes I guess we forget, security is like an onion. You just have a layer. So the more layers you can add in your cyber defense, the better you will fare against threats, I guess.
Yeah.
We touched, I guess, a bit about alert fatigue, but like if you think about how does Mirror help reduce not only alert fatigue but also the incidence of false positives in sort of your software.
Yeah. So basically just saw it last week. One of our customer um, actually we just added a support for JavaScript and TypeScript, and we were seeing the amount of vulnerabilities going down from 166 high severity to 50. And I was shocked. So I think one thing, again, the first layer is that you do the prioritization, right? Then you say, okay, you have few layers. You can do it again, as we've spoken, through the cloud context. You can do it through the code context. And then you're saying most of the vulnerabilities, when we look at the data, are not really being used. Like literally most of that, like the dependencies, because you're using Axios library for HTTP calls. You might be using the put or the get or the put and get, but there are tons of use cases in that library. And because a vulnerability is a mistake, so there's a big likelihood that it wouldn't be in the get function that everybody is using. And that's what we're seeing. And that's very helpful for our customers. And then the second layer is the remediation again. So you're using that prioritization layer to say, okay, now we've prioritized that, and then this issue need to be fixed first. So how do we give you context? Because we're already looking at how your code looks at the third-party package. So maybe we can tell you if you upgrade, may something break? Or what do you need to do on your code, on your side of the code, to be able to adapt to the upgrade? So again, if I'm coming back to the context thing you've been saying before that, putting detection aside, the prioritization together with the remediation, while you can say as a CISO, I don't really care if developers like or don't like security. If you're giving them the tools, they might eventually invite you to the after hour party, which they don't do today probably,
Yep.
because you're just telling them what they need to do, and that's it. They understand why and how they need to fix things.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I always pick up that I spoke to one of the prominent CISOs, and this message always it rings really true. His main goal of how successful he was in organization was how other departments are likely to invite him for a social. Because normally, whenever you view a security is normally viewed as a little cabinet in the basement that nobody wants to talk to.
Yeah.
But when you build and actually start collaborating and people start to listen and you actually are helping business to protect their revenue streams, and actually developers, help them build more quality code, because I view security as part of the quality agenda,
Yeah.
you actually might become a quite likable guy. So, doing that, it's really important. So, yeah, I think it's very important. Now, we touched a bit about, alert fatigue. We touched a bit about false positives. Now, I guess another part of the importance of actually fixing things is, so obviously, I know Mira, I think you can embed it into your CI/CD, and obviously it can do scanning, but again, it creates reactive because it creates alerts. Now, if we flip onto being proactive and actually improving standards, does Mira allow to actually increase or help to define standards of software supply chain in your CI/CD, so it can actually prevent bad things from flowing, I guess, through your pipeline?
Yeah. And I'm going to use a quote. So it's by Yoni Musa from is a director of security at Relativity, and he told me something that I'm going to say. I'm going to steal that and claim it my own.
Yep.
Said block with confidence. So yeah, we allow to block, and I think the shift left kind of movement is still here. And I
Yep.
know it's again, developers do not like to fix, and they don't like to be blocked. But what we do is that we take our contacts and integrate it like through the pull request. You can do it on the IDE as well, but eventually it's when you touch the open source, or if it's just a regular first party SaaS, is when you touch your own code, and that should be on the IDE, of course. And what we do is basically we tell you, listen, you've integrated the malicious library, or this vulnerability is intact, and this is why it's a risk. This is how you use it. Um, Go here and see how you can fix it. For now, it's blocked because the organization policy says, you can't have anything that it might be malicious or might pose a risk to the organization, and putting the definitions of critical, high, whatever the organization decide aside, but it poses a risk on the business. Here you can fix how you can fix it, and then you can move on with your life. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's very important because I just want to add one caveat. I think that the only thing is that I'm all for shifting left, and as long as you can define an organization policy and I guess appetite for risk, that becomes very important because you create a quality stage gate that hopefully prevents from really, really, really bad things flowing into your pipeline. But as I say, with a caveat is that if you look at sort of legacy point of view, we normally know that if you take a cybersecurity department, governance, risk, and compliance department normally are the ones who create policies, and everyone else supposed to adhere to them. But now governance, risk, and compliance have no clue how developers work. So how they can define a policy that developers should adhere to? And that's why I'm caveating is as long as we can bring those parties together and we can agree on a policy and way forward, then we can build that quality stage gate in the pipeline. I think everyone should be happy for it.
100%. And that's why I think like um, having a good application security program and application security team is just underrated how much it's needed.
Yeah, I think sometimes even when I did a presentation recently about application security program, sometimes organizations forget yes, you can start doing DevOps, but then you think oh, we're gonna switch to DevSecOps and it's gonna happen overnight.
Yeah.
No, especially I guess more developers and maybe ops, they're more I guess even more used to working in agile way. But security has never been done agile way before because everything was kind of waterfall. Security used to sign off on things and da da da. So obviously, if you want to take security on a journey on DevSecOps, it's the whole culture shift. It's the whole, you need to permeate and change teams and, give security access, and security needs to be able to respond to developers quickly. Because if if time becomes an issue, security are no longer part of that conversation. You're no longer, going to be asked the question. So it's very important, those things. Now, if we go to, I guess, explore a bit, in so far the journey of Myrror Security, without naming names, if you could share some maybe success stories, how companies are, addressing or defending against, especially against emerging threats that, I guess we know it's not something that easy to address zero threats, but I guess even emerging threats is something that's, you can get ahead with, I guess, with Mira.
Yeah. And like to your point, we started with protecting you from the biggest, but there's no 100%, and today we do not claim it at all, but we're trying to cover as much as needed. And so I think one of the stories would be, post the XZ attack, one of our newer customers reached out throughout those days and asked about the protection. And By the way, while they don't use C or any or of the affected Linux distributions, they were very relieved to know that if something like that were to happen to one of their open source that using, we could protect them because that's our bread and butter.
Yeah.
Now, especially as they use Java, for example, and it turns out that the attacker was a maintainer in the Java version of that library as well. So it was just a matter of time until that happened. And kind of in another case, we tracked down an attempt of a dependency confusion attack on a customer internal package where the attacker tried to manipulate the Artifactory to fetch a public package, which this is exactly what happens in dependency confusion. So um, those kind of attacks, we were surprised to find that although it's not like vulnerabilities, it's not that it happened daily, it happens, and we're super happy to be there for the customer.
Okay, brilliant. Sounds like some really great stories. Now, I guess we discussed about emerging threats. We discussed about some previous threats. Now, if you were to put on the rosy glasses and think about what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years in sort of mirror security journey, what would you think, or what would you project is going to happen?
That's a good question. So if I'm putting the biggest application security platform of the world aside, right?
Mm,
Uh, the biggest cliche always with startup. With the global changes that's happening every couple of weeks, it's hard to see what's going to happen in 5 months. But I will say that I think the application security and again the shift left movement is here to stay as far as I see it, with the caveats that you've just mentioned. And I think there's a huge opportunity today for disruption. And when Veracode came out with their SAST, I think in, I don't know, 2010, it was kind of an alien in the world. Like, why do I need it? I have I have red teams and penetration testing, and I write code and I ship it to my penetration testing team, and they test our code. And today you can't really move without those tools. And I think malicious actors are getting smarter and smarter, and I see Mirror as the application security solution that would be able to give you a peace of mind to know that you are protected from attacks on one end, and also try to be the best friend of the application security and the engineering, and give them context to their day-to-day needed security actions, so they can keep working on what's important to the business while also try to improve the MTTR, if it makes sense.
yeah, yeah, it definitely makes sense. You just touched that. I guess the one thing which I wanted to get your views as well. So, talking about Veracode and some other big companies, there seems to be kind of a shift, I guess, in some sort of ways in cybersecurity industry, that some organizations are trying to move towards the platform view and consolidation through, usually it happens through acquisition.
Yeah.
But I always say to people, I always have that view. I think no, normally the companies are struggling because the problem is, because they go down the acquisition route, and usually it's either becomes not really well maintained because they acquire something amazing, and then that becomes worse over time. So I always say, whatever works for everything doesn't work for nothing. So usually when you become a big platform, there are too many holes, and or where small organizations have their own expertise. So how do you see this changing between, having niche expertise versus platform at sort of, going towards platforms?
Um, so I think I just spoke with one of the sales of one of the startups in the space that's been acquired, and he told me, we were going deep on remediation, and then when now we're integrating to the newer platform, they kind of said, okay, ditch that, and so a lot of the times you kind of lose the track on your intention over there, and as you mentioned, that might be a big problem. So I see best of breed. So first of all, I really like the approach with data like aggregation tools like ASPM or like other aggregation tools we're using today, and getting the data to one place. That's one thing, but it doesn't so, and a data aggregator can't do anything. It can do everything, right? It
Yep.
can like help you remediate your SDLC vulnerabilities and CSPM vulnerabilities. It just can help you like consolidate like to one view, which is nice, or maybe correlate between things.
Yep.
But so the ASPM thing is, for example, is an important piece in my opinion. So to be able to fetch from different tools, but if you look at specific tools, for example, if you integrate it well to the developer's workflow, so it's not a problem. It's not a problem because the dashboard, you need it for reports, maybe for investigation. But if the tool is good enough, it should be integrated with what you already have today. And if it's integrated with what you have today, so it's up to the finance team to deal with the invoices every month or maybe once a year. But other than that, it should be, I won't say seamless because it's not seamless, right? You have to deal with every year with prices and bunch of legal stuff. So I think that's kind of the main problem with having a lot of tools, but you still see a lot of companies using best of breeds. But you've done that more than I did, so I'm happy to hear your take on that.
No, as I say, I think I guess it depends, because that's what I'm saying. It depends on acquired or acquiring party, because I'm not going to mention names here, but there are organizations, say big houses, who might be acquiring some amazing tools, but because they are driving that, they are, say, already on the, trading, for example, on Nasdaq or something like that. They have a goal to get to 100 million ARR, so they might have, say, 80% sales force, and they have no R&D. So they might acquire an amazing tool, but that tool over next 2 years becomes so behind the market
Yeah,
that the platform, it becomes sort of ridden with holes as such, because there are maybe some greater tools and some not greater tools in a platform. So platform as a whole becomes, useless as such. So I guess it really, as I say, it really depends. There are some great companies doing great work in CSPM, for example, and stuff like that. But there are some there who are not doing not so great. So I guess, as you say, it depends. I think the prevalence of stuff like when you're talking about ASPM, that's a really, really interesting thing, because you can still use best of breed scanners, and you just bring data into one platform, which just shows you visibility. So I guess instead of going, to platform monetization and trying, use one scanner for everything, because, scanner for endpoints, scanner for cloud, scanner for code, you might not have one tool that works best for all of them.
yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's the way. Now, I guess we just touched kind of some really great questions. We talked a bit about how companies, and how Myrror is, doing some amazing work in helping secure, especially against malicious code. So those of us who, or especially listeners who have maybe not have heard about Myrror, or want to explore how Myrror could potentially help them, how should they go about? How can they find out more about what Myrror is doing? Maybe find out or get a demo of their platform.
Yeah, first of all, they can reach out to me directly. I'm happy. Since I've been coming from the DevSecOps world, I still really love that. Really love speaking with application security. I'm doing customer success today because I really, really like that. So that's probably the first entry point, of course, through our website. Um, don't connect with me on LinkedIn because I'm posting so many posts today, and I apologize for that. But if you do, just you can hide that.
Yep.
But yeah, through the website, through LinkedIn, each every media works for me, and I'm happy to do one-on-one and just start to talk security, understand needs before we go to the Mirror platform, because not all the time they might need us.
Yeah, I say it's very important about, sharing ideas, sharing, the word and helping community. So, first of all, I think we had an amazing chat, and I wanted to thank Yoad for coming along, showcasing what Myrror is doing. It's amazing, such a young company, and driving, I guess, security software agenda and helping organizations to secure and protect them against emerging threats. So thank you very much for coming along.
You're my pleasure. Really appreciate it.